Both of our speakers tonight were recipients of our conservation grant program last year. So they received awards and they did projects that we felt were really important. They're local projects and they do have direct conservation impact for our wildlife. And so we asked if they would be gracious enough to come and speak about their projects, and they said yes. So we're very excited to have two award recipients here tonight. And I'll turn it over to Caylea.
Thanks. I'd like to extend a welcome to everyone also here tonight. Thanks so much for coming out. I wear two hats here, as you already heard Gretchen say. I'm a member of the Conservation Advisory Committee and faculty member in the Department of Wildlife. And I'm up here not just because I've helped organize the lecture series, but I'm really proud to be introducing two of our Humboldt Wildlife graduate students who have been doing really excellent and exciting work in the program. And we're doing something a little different tonight, so we usually have one long lecture, but because we wanted to promote our grant recipients, we wanted to have them come together to present their work. So what we'll do is we'll have two talks, as you heard from Gretchen and you've seen Bill on the poster, and Caitlin will speak first on her Fisher project, and then we'll ask her questions for a few minutes. Then Carrie will speak and we'll ask her questions for a few minutes, and then if you want to ask open free-for-all questions, that will also be fine. I'm really pleased to first introduce Caylea Commins. She has come to us from Colorado originally, and she got her degree, her bachelor's degree in the Department of Wildlife at Colorado State University at Fort Collins. After that, she did various field projects to get experience, as most of our students do, and has worked on a variety of species from birds to up to mountain lions. And she came out to Humboldt County to work out at Hoopa on a Fisher project back in 2011. And she's been working for them for 5 years now. And a couple of years ago approached me to take some of the work that she was interested in and work towards her master's degree on some of that. So she's been collaborating with those folks out at Hoopa. And I'm particularly excited about both of these talks because I think they're a really interesting approach that we try and take in the department to managing and protecting wildlife, sort of less invasive approaches and really applied approaches to looking out for wildlife and managing them in a kind of human-dominated landscape. So without further ado, I'd love to turn the floor over to Caitlin. Thanks.
Very much, Dr. Gunter, for that introduction, and thank you all for coming out here. I was afraid you were going to have to brave the rain to get here, but it seems like it died down a little bit. And as she said, I'll be talking about the phenotypic patterns of fishers in California. Reproduction is a major energetic expense for all mammals, and for mammals, this investment is particularly large. Most mammals give birth to live young. They also provide parental care for their young, and they also produce milk to feed their young. And this production of milk, or lactation, is considered to be one of the most energetically expensive components in reproduction. So given the energy expenses of producing milk and caring for their young, these mammals require extensive resources when they are raising their young. And so they can be sensitive to disturbances that might alter their ability to acquire that energy. These disturbances could either directly alter the individual that's raising young by displacing them, or they could also indirectly impact the animal by altering their behavioral patterns and thereby impacting their ability to acquire the energy needed to raise their young. So this cute little girl over here is a fisher, and I believe that this species may be particularly vulnerable to disturbances when they're denning. And so before I get into why these fishers might be vulnerable to disturbances when they're denning, I just want to introduce the species first, because they're a pretty elusive carnivore. You're very lucky to see them out here in the wild. So the fisher is a mid-sized carnivore. It's about the size of a house cat, and it's extremely well adapted to climbing trees. Like this fisher, you can see poking her head out of an old bird nest in a tiny little Douglas fir tree. So So they're typically thought of as the species that are associated with old growth forests. And they used to range widely in Northern California and also in the Sierra Nevada mountain range. However, now in the state of California, they're only found in 3 isolated populations. And with their populations dwindling, the West Coast population of fishers is being considered for listing as threatened under the Endangered Species Act. So current threats to fisher include isolation, habitat loss or alteration, toxicants in the environment, and predation, primarily by bobcats and mountain lions. And I won't get into too much details on those threats, because that is not the main focus of my talk. But I do just want to point out that these fishers on the West Coast are imperiled, and it's really important that managers are able to monitor their population numbers and to predict future population declines or, conversely, the recovery of the species. So one of the ways that managers can do that is by studying the reproductive ecology of the animal. Fishers are an obligate cavity user. That means they give birth to and they raise their young inside of tree cavities. They give birth in late March or early April. And the kids are pretty helpless and immobile until they're about 12 weeks old. So during this time, the female leaves her kits inside of the tree cavity, and then she goes off and forages on her own to catch wood rats and things to feed herself. And then she'll come back, and occasionally she'll move the kits to a new den tree. We're not really sure why they move from tree to tree so much, but there's been some research that is looking into that right now. And so the kids are dependent on the mother's milk until they're about 8 to 10 weeks old. After that, they'll still follow the mother around once they're able to walk and climb trees, and they'll stay with the mother until the early fall, or sometimes even into late fall. So I mentioned before that fishers may be particularly vulnerable to these disturbances while they're denning. And that's because of this long and narrow body shape of the fisher. So that long and narrow shape it's kind of a small animal, but it has a lot of surface area because of that length, and that excess surface area leads to excess heat loss. So fishers have to expend a lot of energy to maintain their internal body temperatures. And so faced with that, and then adding in the need to produce milk for their kits for 10 weeks, and then the need to move back and forth from these den sites out to good foraging sites, the fishers are really under a lot of energetic constraints during the time when they're denning. So why do we study fisher den ecology? Well, females have to be able to successfully reproduce and raise their young in order to maintain a stable population. By studying denning fishers, we're able to learn a lot more about the specific structures that they're using. So we can learn what types of trees they use, what the stand characteristics in the forest are, and with that information we can work to protect those areas for denning fishers. And so we're also able to get information on population dynamics by studying denning fishers. By studying these dens, we can estimate the reproductive success of fishers. And if we know how many kits fishers are producing and how many of those kits are surviving, then we can get a pretty good idea of how many individuals are coming into the population the next year. So if you look closely at this beautiful fisher here, it's a very cute picture, you'll see this little black thing right underneath the neck, and that is part of a radio collar. So unfortunately, there isn't really any other way around it. To study fisher den ecology, you need to capture the fishers, put a radio collar on them, and then find the den using that radio collar. And so after we've captured and collared an animal, and when it's the season for denning, we'll go around with this radio telemetry equipment, and we will follow the signals put out by those callers to an area where we think the fisher's in. And we'll circle around the tree until we're pretty confident that yes, the fisher is in that tree. So from here on out, the rest of my talk, I'll be referring to that homing in on the radio signal to a fisher as a walk-in. And we can't just do one walk-in to a fisher in a tree, call it in, and assume that she, successfully reproduced. Instead, we need to repeatedly visit that tree while the fisher is present to confirm that she's been using it for multiple days and that it is in fact dead. From there on out, we need to continue to follow the fisher until the kits are about 8 to 10 weeks of age so that we know her reproductive attempts were successful. Because fishers can and often do actually fail in their attempts to raise kits. So one way that researchers study fisher dens is by using remote cameras. And this here is just a video of a female who is moving her kit to a new den tree. And that kid's about 12 weeks old, so it can kind of wobble around on its feet, but it's still not ready to move around. So the remote cameras work by using motion and heat sensors that trigger the camera to take either a series of pictures or a video. And when they work properly, they're really great because we can confirm that the tree is den tree. We'll get pictures of the female coming up and down for multiple days, and you're pretty certain that's den. They can also provide estimates of litter size when you catch a picture of the female's moving kits. So this female, for example, is climbing down the den tree, and in her mouth is a tiny little kit. I don't know if you can see that very well, but that is a baby fisher. The problem with remote cameras is that they're pretty expensive. The reliable models out there cost about $500 a unit. And when you consider a den tree this size, you have to have at least 3 cameras placed around that entire tree to ensure that you're going to get that fisher moving into the frame. It also takes a lot of time and effort to set up these cameras and to maintain them. And then furthermore, these cameras are not always reliable. They frequently miss the fishers coming and going to the trees, and they frequently miss the females when they're moving their kits. And part of that may be because, as I said before, fishers are very well adapted to climbing. Instead of coming down the tree like that, she might come out of her cavity, go further up the tree, find a long limb, and then connect to the nearest tree nearby and totally avoid camera detection. So another way that researchers commonly study fisher dens is by climbing the den trees while another fisher is away. After they've climbed the tree, the researchers can stick the camera down into the cavity to count the number of kits that are in there. And they can also temporarily extract the kits from the cavity to collect biological samples, such as hair for DNA, or also to pit tag the fisher, which is essentially attaching and identifying a microchip like you would your pet dog. And because the kits are too small to put a radio collar on, that microchip helps us ID them later when they're trapped and are old enough to get a radio collar, and then we can study their dispersal patterns. Of course, climbing these trees, as you can see from that one over there, is a huge effort. There's a lot of equipment and training involved, and it's very time consuming. And it's not always successful. A lot of the den trees are too decayed to even climb. And then furthermore, some of the den cavities are so deep that our cameras can't reach all the way down to see the kits. So what I've been working on for the past 2 years, with the help of a local electrical engineer, is a way to study fisher dens that's new using the new technology. And so that funny looking device right there is a remote radio telemetry date logger. What it does is it records the presence and absence of the female at the den tree using the signals from a radio collar. They're relatively inexpensive and easy to build. You could buy something similar from a professional wildlife company, but it would sell for about $4,000 a pop. These little devices here cost only $230 to make. So there's huge savings there. But the best part about these devices is that it can collect a ton of data without the researcher having to be present at the den frequently. So while traditional den research methods might require several walk-ins to confirm the den tree, this device can confirm a tree during a single walk-in. And another benefit to this device is that it can be used to estimate the litter size of the animal based on her activity the final day when she uses the tree. So this is just a quick diagram illustrating kind of the whole process of setting these out in the field. First, you still have to have your person out there with the receiver and the antenna following the signals to the tree. And remember, the fisher is inside of the cavity, so you don't necessarily ever see the fisher when you're doing this. And then the researcher can then put the data logger out near the tree, and that will record the presence and absence of the female over the next few days. The researcher can leave, come back 7 days later, and he can wait to come back for when the fisher is actually gone from the tree so that he's not disturbing her again when he walks in. Swap out the battery, and then you can download the data to see what she's been up to for the past few days. And so this is an example of what it looks like when it's deployed in the field. The den tree is actually the smaller tree here in the background, and the data logger is right there. So it's pretty well hidden, but these devices are still not entirely non-invasive. The fishers know they're there. You notice on this picture here, the fisher left a nice little scat present. She's claiming that device as her own. So there were three main questions that I was really interested in answering with these data loggers. One, do our walk-ins disturb radio-collared denning fishers? Two, can the data loggers accurately estimate hit counts? 3, what are the den attendance patterns of fishers? And I'm going to walk you through each one of these and how I answer them using the data loggers. So first, I'm going to go over how we collected the data. To answer these questions, myself and a huge team of other wildlife researchers out there deployed data loggers at dens this past year. They deployed them at dens of 36 fishers across the state. Some of those were up here in the Hoopa study area, which is not too far from home. Some of them were deployed in the Sterling study site, which is actually a reintroduced population of fishers in the northern Sierra Nevada. And then some of them were also deployed at these two sites, Sugar Pine and Kings River, where there's a very small isolated population in the southern Sierra Range. So getting back to my first question, do our walk-ins disturb these radio-collared fishers? And just a reminder, a walk-in is when we use the radio telemetry signals to home in on that female at the den tree. So to answer this question, I compared the behaviors of fishers on days when we walked in versus days when they were left alone. And what I found is that when researchers walk in on an animal, that animal spends more time at the den that day than she otherwise would. So on average, a female fisher will end up spending 1.2 hours more at the den on a day when she's been walked in on. So it's clear that we are altering their behavior. But the question is, are we disturbing them, or how much are we disturbing them? And if I were to guess, I would say probably not a lot. 1.2 hours, that's a pretty small time frame in a 24-hour period. Additionally, we're doing these walk-ins during the daytime, and their primary prey species, the wood rat, is active at night. So we're unlikely to disturb any foraging events and interrupt their energetic balance. However, if we were to walk in frequently, say every other day or even every 3 days on these fissures, those effects might be cumulative, and then we might be talking more of an impact. So moving on to my second question, can the data loggers accurately estimate kick counts? What I did here was I compared the estimated kick counts from the data loggers to the estimated kick counts from remote cameras placed in fissure dens. And I found that yes, the data loggers do provide reasonable and accurate estimates of kick counts. The data loggers actually provided estimates for kick counts 67% of the time, while the remote cameras only provided kick counts 51% of the time. So they may actually be more effective at getting these kick counts. So we had 18 den trees where we had the radio telemetry data logger and the remote cameras simultaneously deployed. At 13 of those den trees, the estimate of the kick count from the data logger agreed with the estimate of the kick count from the remote cameras. So that's promising. It seems like they're getting fairly accurate representations. Of the remaining 5 times where the 2 objects didn't agree, 2 of the data loggers estimated that females had 1 more kit than was seen on remote cameras. And then there were 3 instances where we knew the cameras were wrong and the data loggers were right. And that's because we had a camera at a den tree. It caught the fissure coming down and moving 1 kit. But then we would follow that same fissure to the next tree, put up the cameras again, and it would catch over 2 kits to that tree. So these data loggers really show a lot of promise for achieving some of the same goals of fissure den studies, and at a fraction of the cost and with less effort than using remote cameras or tree climbing. And then finally, we'll get to the question that has actually been the main focus of my research. What are the den attendance patterns of fishers? So how much time do they spend at their den? How does that change as the season progresses? And as you might expect, the den attendance varies as the kits age. So to give you a little snapshot, when fishers are 2 weeks old, the mother's spending about 75% of her time at the den, and she's almost always present during the nighttime. She only leaves the den during the warmest part of the day, which is in the late afternoon. In contrast, when the kids are about the age of weaning, 8 to 10 weeks, the female is spending only 30 to 40% of her time, sometimes as low as 20%. And then she's almost always away at night, and she's spending the time there in these early morning hours. And something that really surprised me when I was looking at these data was that fishers can leave their kids alone for really long periods of time. We had one female who left her kids alone for 25 hours and 50 minutes. And that seems like a really long time to leave a kid without food and without warmth. And we had this happen for several individuals throughout the season, and it seemed like all of the kids were fine, and they survived being left alone that long. So that was just kind of surprising to me. But perhaps the most important pattern that I'm pulling out of my data is that fishers are almost always at their den during crepuscular morning hours. So crepuscular morning hours are an hour before or after sunrise. And it's also the coldest time in the day, generally speaking. So I think that this time of day is really critical for the females to be at the den, keeping the kids warm, aiding with their thermal regulation. And that pattern holds true whether the kids are young or old. So I'm still working on analyzing these den attendance data sets. There's a lot of work to be done. But one of the first things that I'm looking at is what environmental variables influence fisher den attendance patterns. So for example, how does rain influence how long a fisher leaves a den per day? And how does the den tree species and size, which influences the insulation in the cavity, how does that impact your attendance patterns? But ultimately, what I'm really hoping to do with these data and with data collected in the future is to look at how other anthropogenic disturbances might influence fisher denning patterns. Specifically, I'm interested in timber harvest and fuels management, because these are pretty broad spread operations within the range of the fisher, and they do occur during the same time when fishers are giving birth and raising their young in these dentries. So that picture right there is actually taken at a fisher den. There's the female up there peering into the tiny little cavity that's hardly noticeable. But if you look down below her, and I don't know if you can see this very well, there's an orange spray paint line around the base of that tree. And that indicates that tree is to be harvested in a timber sale unit. So timber harvest definitely has the ability to directly impact these animals by removing their dentries. But it also still has that ability to alter their behavioral patterns and indirectly influence their denning success. So with that, none of this effort would have been possible without so many people. There were a lot of different organizations working on this, all towards fisher conservation. I do, of course, want to point out the Sequoia Park Zoo, and thank you very much for your contribution to this study. I think zoos are really critical for conservation, and not just the zoos themselves, but the people that visit zoos and support zoos. So thank all of you guys in the audience today for being out here and supporting the zoo. And I was going to acknowledge some of the crew members that were here collecting data. I see one of them in the audience, Isaac Kelsey. He collected data for me down in the sugar pine study site. Yeah, with that, I'm happy to take a few questions.
You mentioned timber harvest might influence denning success and denning selection sites. But is there enough data to correlate between mature stands of timber for denning sites in close proximity to reprod, which may have a higher productivity for rodents or anything like that, so they select different sites that way? Or obviously, if you put everything even age stands, then but then you see a balance. There's enough research to see that there could be some benefit from timber harvesting.
Well, we have at the Pupa study area seen many fishers use residual trees in timber harvest, and we believe that the fishers are still doing so well in this area because of timber harvest, and it creates a lot of wood rat habitat, which of course is great for fishers. Obviously, clear cutting would not be much to the fisher, but I think timber management can be done right where it can coexist with fishers.
Where does the male disappear to when the female is denning?
So actually, the males come running when the females start thinning. Fishers and other mustelids are really unique. They have what's called delayed implantation. So as soon as they give birth, they're ready to breed again, and then they won't. Babies won't start maturing until later in the winter. But the males, they will sit on the branch of the den tree, chew the cavity, try to get at the females. So they're around.
They're close by.
Yes, they do not help in the fertility care though.
They do not.
Let's see.
You said that fishers move among dens. Is that restricted within a territory, like a home range, or? And if so, what size would that be? I mean, if the unit was harvested, can they move long enough distances between dens to find home range?
Yeah, so usually all of the den trees that female will use will be restricted within our home range. So for a female, that's about 2 square miles, I believe. But I do not know how far they can successfully move kits from den tree to den tree, because the herself at risk when she's carrying the kid, and she's also putting the kid at risk. So there's a lot more effort going on rather than just walking through the tree. So I don't have an answer to that. Do you know why they're moving like that? We're not sure. We have some guesses. We think one reason might be the parasite load in the den cavity. So fishers like dogs get fleas and ticks. And so maybe at some point, these kids are cooped up inside the cavity all day long, and the mother comes home and brings some fleas. And maybe the fleas at some point are just too much to handle, so they move to a new tree. It can also be related to predators in the area. Maybe a bobcat has been walking regularly by that tree, and that female wants to get them out of there into a safer spot. And then it can also have to do with just the tree itself and weather patterns. Maybe if there's a really bad rainstorm and she figures out, like, oh, this cavity isn't totally waterproof, I need to move my kids right away.
How many kids do they usually have?
They average 2 kids, but they can have anywhere from 1 to 4.
And they use the same dens year after year?
Sometimes they do, yeah. Sometimes, they seem to have a really high site fidelity, which means they'll go back to the same trees. They won't necessarily use it consecutive years, but they will go back at some point and probably use it again.
I think I'll just, we'll transition, we have another talk, so we'll thank Caylea again for that excellent. Carrie is an alumna of Humboldt State in the Department of Wildlife. She did her undergraduate studies here. She worked with one of our faculty members, Matt Johnson, who gave a talk in our first series, talking about ecosystem services and how wildlife can be of value to people. And he specifically works in agricultural settings. He gave a talk here about birds and coffee. And Carrie was working on those aspects with Matt as an undergraduate and did an amazing honors project working on coffee farms in Kenya. And then she went away for a little bit, I think, and then she returned to do her graduate work with Matt Johnson on an entirely new and exciting project, which involved looking at how barn owls may help in vineyards. So again, in an agricultural setting, how wildlife can be helpful, economically beneficial to people. And that's what she's going to talk about today. Did you bring the wine? I told her she would bring the wine.
She said, I'm going to talk to you today about my graduate research. My talk is titled Owls and Wine, a Perfect Pairing. Rodents, especially gophers and gulls, are problematic pests in vineyards. They cause all kinds of damage, such as chewing on vine roots and girdling vines that will eventually kill them. They're especially problematic in young vineyards, where they can, if they girdle the vines are dying, they'll have to be replaced. They also chew on pipes, and their burrow systems make it difficult for tractors to move down the roads and also cause erosion. So vineyard managers have lots of methods for reducing rodent pests when their populations oscillate up and down, and when their populations boom, they can cause lots of damage all at once. And so vineyard managers will hastily put rodenticide out on the landscape, which we're very familiar with in this area. Rodenticide is harmful to wildlife and to pets and people. Other methods of reducing rodents are trapping. And so trapping is pretty effective at reducing pest rodents, but it's also very time-consuming and therefore expensive. Vineyard managers, when rodent populations are really bad, they will sometimes block the tunnels of burrowing gophers, and they will pump toxic gas into their tunnels to kill them. So this just shows what extremes vineyard managers will go to control vineyards or to control growers. So an alternative way to reduce rodent populations potentially is to introduce barn owls into the vineyard and to supply them with nesting habitat so that they come and reproduce there. Barn owls are natural predators of rodent pests. They primarily eat rodents. About 95% of the pregnant is rodents. And they're especially suited for this system for a few specific reasons. So one, barn owls have large clutches, so they produce lots of young. They're a short-lived owl. They only live 2 to 5 years in the wild. And so to compensate for their short lifespan, they have lots of chicks. So they can lay up to a dozen eggs at a time. And the average is more like 5 or 6. The highest number of eggs in my nest boxes that I'll be talking about today was 11 last week. So they have a lot of mouths to feed, basically. So each chick needs to eat at least 1 rodent a day. So if they have 6 chicks, and then each adult needs to eat 1 or 2 rodents to sustain itself, that's about 10 to 12 rodents every single week, actually, as a day, that they have to eat. Another reason that barn owls are especially suited for this is that they're not easily disturbed by human activity. So, as their name indicates, they're barn owls, and they readily nest in barns and open structures, and they readily nest in artificial nest boxes. So, naturally, they would nest in cavities and trees, but due to habitat loss and urbanization and agricultural intensification, those nesting sites are often in short supply. So providing them can actually be beneficial to barn owls. They are driven breeders, so they've been known to nest in between hay bales, in like stacks of hay. Farmers will pull up the hay bales at the end of the year, and there'll be usually barn owls that end up in a rescue center somewhere. So this relationship is pretty widespread in agriculture. So using barn owls to feed on which are native in many parts of the world. They're most widely distributed around the world. Using them or attracting them to agriculture is pretty common in lots of systems, such as in Malaysia, where they use them in palm oil plantations to eat rats, and in rice paddies. They've recently been putting up barn owl boxes in orange groves in Florida, as well as all throughout California. So you would think that this would be pretty well studied research in Napa, because there are hundreds, if not thousands, of nesting barn owls, or barn owl nest boxes, in Napa Valley. And as the sign suggests, it is world famous, so it has name recognition. So research that is conducted in Napa has the potential to be widely used in other places. And the farmers there and the people in Napa actually really like barn owls. So this really cool barn owl art project is at the end of someone's driveway. so they're receptive to having barn owls in their neighborhoods. So, like I said, I searched the literature and I found relatively little about barn owls. There's a lot about barn owl biology and barn owls and other agricultural systems, like I mentioned, but there was little about in the scientific literature about barn owls in vineyards. So I took kind of an informal approach where I went down, I made a bunch of contacts with vineyard owners and managers, and I just went to them directly and conducted personal interviews and just had a conversation basically with about 10 farmers and said, what are the main problems on the ground? What do you guys want to know information about? I'm open to many ideas. And I got 3 main points. So they have no idea where to put nest boxes, basically. So they have a 100-acre vineyard. Do they put the nest boxes in the middle of the vineyard? Do they put them on the edges? Do they put them in trees? They're like, we're just putting them there right now. Wherever is convenient is where we're putting them. So there's also, as this picture illustrates, lots of different designs of nest boxes. So this is a plastic nest box. This one way up here in this tree is a wooden box. There's wooden boxes with lots of different designs and shapes and sizes, perches, and all kinds of different ways you can build a wooden nest box. So what kind of nest boxes do barn owls prefer? No one really knows. So they're also frustrated that there's a lot of unoccupied nest boxes. So they're investing in providing this artificial nest site, where they're purchasing these boxes and they're not really very cheap, or they're building them themselves and they're maintaining them and they're putting them on the landscape. And if the barn owls aren't coming, then they're not getting any return on that investment. So this information led me to my 2 main research questions, which were, how does habitat surrounding nest boxes influence nest box selection? And I'm going to look at that at 3 different spatial scales. And then what sort of boxes do barn owls want to nest in, basically? What do they like their house made out of? So in order to answer those questions, I monitored 297 nest boxes on 65 vineyards last breeding season, last March. And I monitored nest boxes by inserting a small camera into the nest box opening that was on an extendable pole that I had live feed on my computer screen in front of me. And this is a relatively minimally invasive method for seeing what's going on inside the box. I monitored all 297 nest boxes 3 times during the month of March, because that's the main breeding period when owls are needing to lay their eggs and setting up. And then I continued to monitor the occupied nest boxes, and I defined occupied as boxes where barn owls were actively breeding and laid eggs, and hopefully were raising young. I continued to monitor those boxes until either the parents abandoned the box for some reason, or until the chicks fledged, which means they fly out on their own. And this figure over here, looks like a little stretched out, but I am put this up here to show you where all of my 65 ranches were. So each of those white dots is a ranch that I visited. And then the pretty colors are different land cover types. So those are different habitat types on a large scale. So what's important about this that I will bring up later on at the top is that down here in the southern part of Napa Valley, there's a lot of orange, which is grassland. And barn owls prefer to hunt in grassland over other habitat types. The purple is vineyard, so you can see that on Napa. It's vineyard. And then as you move north in Napa Valley, the valley actually narrows and the habitat changes from open grassland to more mixed forest and oak woodland, which, as you will see, isn't quite as preferred by barn owls. So now I'm going to show you some cool pictures and hopefully some videos if we can make it work. Some things that I found in the nest boxes when I was monitoring them. So this is a pair of adult barn owls that were setting up early in the season in a nest box, and they ended up breeding in that box. So barn owls are really ugly. So this guy is about a week old. And when barn owls hatch out of the egg, they are naked and pink, and they have their eyes closed, and they can't feed themselves or do anything. They're like little pinky mice, basically. And so they develop pretty quickly. As you can see in this picture, there are actually a couple of eggs that haven't even hatched yet. And then this guy is a week old or so, and then there's a fuzzball over here that's older. And so this is something interesting about barn owls is that, which is different than other birds, is that as soon as they start laying their eggs, they start incubating them. And as soon as they start incubating them, the chicks start to develop. So if they lay 1 egg every 24 hours, which they don't ever lay any more than that, if they lay 1 egg every 24 hours and they lay 10 eggs, that would be up to 10 days age difference. This little chick, it's a really hot day, I took this picture, and this little chick decided to crawl out from under its mom that was brooding it. But mostly I'm showing this slide to illustrate the nesting material that barn owls use. So they don't bring in any sort of sticks or twigs or grass or anything. They just regurgitate pellets, which is rodent fur and bones, and then they tear that up into little bits, and it's a disgusting mess, basically. So, and that's what they use. This is a chick probably eating one of its first meals on its own. It's about 2 days old or so. 2 weeks old, it looks like it's Irish right to open. And I'm mostly showing this video to illustrate my methods were very invasive. So I stuck my camera in there, no one really seemed to be too upset. Eating. You know what, it's a really dark video, so unfortunately I can't really tell. Go for it. Nathan was saying go for it, he saw the tail, he's shaking his head back there, so probably go for it. So I'm going to go back to the video in a second. So these are crazy movie teenage punk rock owls, and they're about 5 to 6 weeks old in that picture. They fledge the nest at 8 to 9 weeks. Oh, you can hear it. You're missing out.
They're responding here.
So these guys are about 6 weeks old. And what I think is interesting here is that they're hissing. If the sound was better, you could hear that. And that is something that only barn owls do. So other owls hoot, like you normally know about when you're kids and stuff, we look stuff like barn owls hoot. Well, I mean, how owls hoot, but barn owls don't. They just hiss and squawk and make dumb noises. So there were other species using the nest boxes as well. This is the American kestrel, and I had a few boxes where American kestrels were nesting in the barn owl boxes after the owls had left, or the owls had used the boxes. And then there were also western screech owls, which this one on the left here was nesting, and this guy was really funny, and every single time I checked this nest box, there was a screech owl roosting in it during the day with his face smashed up in the corner of the nest box. So, I don't know. So he was in trouble. Okay, so getting back to my research. In order to answer the question, how does habitat influence nest box occupancy and selection, I measured different habitat characteristics at 3 spatial scales, like I indicated earlier. So I looked at the nest box itself, and I collected information about what the nest box was made out of, how tall it was, what the orientation of it was, how the nest box was constructed. And then I did local vegetation plots, which were 75-meter plots where I characterized the vegetation within that lot, especially ground cover, which influences rodents a lot. And I took measurements to the nearest tree and to the nearest, for roosting and to the nearest building as potential disturbance, as potential cause of disturbance. And I also took note of what kind of management practices we're having on the farm. So, is it an organic farm or was it a conventional farm? And then I also, going back to that map that I showed you before with all the pretty colors, I'm doing a home range analysis. So the home range of barn owls is about 1 to 2 kilometers. So around each barn owl box, I'm characterizing the habitat types in 1 to 2 kilometers from the box to see if that influences nest box selection. So in addition to measuring habitat and monitoring nest box occupancy, I also banded approximately 50 nest sites that were nesting in the nest boxes I was monitoring. And this is the first year of hopefully a long-term data set where we're going to continue to band nest sites. And the information we need to get out of this is understanding survivorship, how long those birds live for, and then also understanding dispersal of nest sites. Do they end up living and or breeding near to where they were hatched? So this is my advisor, Matt Johnson, and he really likes baby barn owls and doesn't think that they smell at all. If you know him, you can tease him about that. And these are just some pictures from our banding days. This is Jessie Ruckard, she was at HSU. Brina is a current undergrad who came in with my close-time volunteer with me. And we banded birds between the ages of 3 weeks and about 5 to 6 weeks. So I'm just going to share with you some very preliminary results. 91 of the boxes that I monitored had breeding owls in them, which is pretty good. About 1/3 of the boxes had owls. And of those 91 boxes, 69 boxes produced at least 1 chick, so we're successful. The other boxes failed for unknown reasons at different stages of the nesting cycle. And those occupied boxes were spread out over 30 acres, so indicating that barn owls are using a lot of different areas. So only 2 out of the 50 classic X boxes that were in my example were occupied, indicating that barn owls probably don't prefer that style of boxes in this system. In other places, they've got pretty good nest success with them, but not in at least not this year. And also, I haven't done much analysis yet, but what I have done is I found that more grassland and riparian, if there is more grassland and riparian around a ranch, then there's a higher chance of nest boxes being occupied on that ranch. And this makes sense because barn owls hunt primarily in grassland. So this is the only graph I'm going to show you. This just shows the relationship that I just explained, that there's a positive relationship between occupied nest boxes and grassland habitat. There's more grassland habitat, there's more occupied nest boxes, and then riparian habitat also is influencing occupancy around boxes within 2 kilometer buffers. And then this also shows that there's a negative relationship. There's more unoccupied boxes where there's more mixed forest and oak woodlands, and this is probably due to great horned owls being present in more forested systems, and great horned owls prey on barns. So future research, I need to finish my analysis next semester. That's going to happen. I'm going to continue to monitor 150 nest boxes next spring to see if there is annual variation in occupancy and nest box selection. And then Ron Mel, who's right there, give him a shout out. He is going to put GPS trackers on barn owls to see where exactly they hunt, if they hunt in the night. I have lots of people to thank, not just my advisor. And then I, of course, have to thank the state Vineyards and the vineyard management companies that I'm working closely with, and the wineries. And then my field crew that came out and helped me. Grant's undergrad, Jesse graduated from HSU. John lives in Napa. He came out of March. Matt Berman is my amazing husband that decided to come out in the field and help me collect data. Maxine helped us out, and then I had funding from Sequoia Park Zoo. The Tremont Scholarship is paying for my education and low costs and exhibition, and the brokerage from
It's not poisoning gophers while you're studying barn owl reproduction.
Yeah, it's not something that I am looking at, but something I didn't show, a result that I didn't show is that on organic vineyards I have.
If the owls are successful, are they going to eliminate the food source?
That's a
Or
good
they're
question.
always going to be more?
Yeah, so that's a really good question.
So you're never gonna run out of gophers.
So there's a couple ways to answer that. One way is that gophers and bulls have an oscillating population. Their population oscillates. So there are boom years when there are tons, and then there are bust years when they don't aren't very successful, and that's often due to rainfall. And so the barn owls kind of follow behind that, where in years where there's a lot of gophers, they tend to reproduce more, and in years where there isn't enough gophers to feed their young, tend to not.
So the owl population should also change.
The owl population is definitely fluctuates.
And what was the largest number of little owls?
I had one box that had 11 eggs, and the eggs didn't hatch for some reason. I had another box that had 10 nestlings at one time, and then 7 of them ended up letting.
Wow.
Healthy.
In your interviews with the vineyard managers or owners, did you get a sense that they believed barn owls were effective, or were they just kind of doing it because culturally that's what you do, is put a barn owl boxes of vineyards and
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's a lot of variation in that. I am actually doing formal surveys as well. I'm really interested in the perception of wildlife, and so I sent out a bunch of formal surveys to vineyard managers trying to answer that question more specifically. And it seems to be split down the middle. Some people really think that they have fewer rodents because there are owls in their vineyard. Some people are just like, yeah, it helps, I'm sure. And some people are like, I don't know, I don't really care, but there's owl boxes. The last guy who worked here, so I'm not gonna take him down. So, there's lots of different ideas about what it actually, and that's actually something that is kind of hotly debated in the ecology world as well, is that it's a natural predator-prey relationship. So are barn owls able, yes, they eat a lot of rodents, but are they able to actually eat enough rodents to reduce the rodent population? So that